Welcome to this edition of the Arreoblue Podcast, where we talk about all things data. We're really lucky today to be joined by Rob Kent. Rob Kent is an extremely experienced retail CDO. He's worked in the industry for many years. He was one of the first retail CDOs to actually sit on the exec board of a FTSE 100 company. And he's also been a member of Data IQ since 2016, often featuring in the top 10 most influential data people in the UK. We're going to be talking a little bit about the role of the CDO and how that has evolved over the last 10 years, as well as talking about how when you enter a new organization, you measure the data health of what is going on there and how you prioritize some of the activities that you're looking at. And then finally, a little bit on how to work best with consultancies and the variation between different consultancies. But before we go into those questions, I'll hand over to Rob so that he can quickly introduce himself.
Thanks, Stephen, and thanks for asking me to come along. It's been a pleasure. So look, I'm Rob, and as you kindly introduced, I've been doing this for a while now. I've kind of been in all things data and analytics almost by accident for probably 30 odd years, and certainly over the last 20 years, quite a lot of retail experience. Although when you started to ask me, a retail CDO, I never really considered myself as a retailer. I've probably cut my teeth and learned as I go along what that looks like. So yeah, I'm currently at Greggs, the huge high street brand for food on the go, and I lead all things data and AI there, and I've been there for just over a year and a half.
Brilliant, fantastic, and thank you so much for coming along. So just to give us some of the highlights and some of the things that you've seen that have changed as a CDO over the sort of over some of your tenure, and some of the things, the priorities, and how they've changed.
I think in some ways everything's changed and nothing's changed. I frequently find myself in conversation talking about new and latest concepts of what we're trying to do, and then I think back 20 odd years ago, and we're probably trying to do the same thing. So in terms of getting to know your customer and doing the best by your customer, I don't think that's a new concept. I think it's probably got more sophisticated as the years have gone on, and obviously the tech's helped a lot in terms of how deep you go. But in terms of customer analytics, there's no new concept there in terms of how you want to try and understand the customer better. I think obviously retail has gone through its own journey over the last 20 odd years, and with all the digital natives coming and taking a piece of the pie, a big chunk of the pie. So everyone's had to try and respond to that. I think the multi-channel element of how most physical retailers want to play has become more important, and again adds complexity to what you want to try and do with data and AI. Obviously margins are still tight, competition's huge, and I think anything that drives out cost while still maintaining high quality product and high quality customer service, I think is always been on the agenda for retailers, and now probably certainly the last 5-7 years, the technology and the techniques have obviously gained a degree of hype about what they can do to help you, and I think most of that's real, and I think it's a case of finding out for yourselves and your organisation what works for you.
Yeah, fantastic, and we've certainly seen a lot of things recently where that experimentation and iterations. And I guess we've talked a little bit about the retail industry change, and you've worked with several retail companies throughout your tenure. When you go into a new company and talking a little bit about data health, what's one of the vital signs that you kind of look for to understand how data is perceived and how well it's being run within the organization, and I guess some of the priorities that you need to look at as a CDO?
Yeah, no, I think you've just used the magic word there, if I'm honest, Stephen. So I probably look at three things. First thing is perception. So what is the perception of data quality within the organisation? And anyone at a senior level is usually going in a meeting with a load of senior stakeholders. They'll be the first to tell you that something's not right. It's never right. There's multiple versions of the truth. There's two answers in every meeting. Or that's always wrong. That's always right. And more often than not, it tends to be more perception than reality. There's always some reality in what people are perceiving to be quite a bad problem. But you can't get it in the way. What you can't do is then go and instigate a multi-million-pound program on the back of someone thinks that something's wrong. you have to get into the covers as to whether that's true and whether it is and whether it's meaningful. So materiality is something that I always play on in terms of it can be wrong, but so what? So perception is the first thing. So understanding where senior stakeholders' heads are at. Second thing is the prevalence of Excel in the process. I know it sounds trivial, but you can get a real taste for how an organisation thinks and works, depending on how much they're dependent on the use of Excel or homegrown cottage industry tools. And I think from a data quality perspective, I think when you can start to look at the high risk areas, and again coming back to materiality, if you've got an organisation that is hell bent on running its key processes using Excel, it kind of gives you an inkling as to whether you've got something to fix. And then the third thing is obviously data governance has always been a thing. And I still come across lots of organisations where some are taking more seriously than others. Some have had huge investment plans and investment programs in it. I kind of sense, okay, what's the regime around data governance? Whether it be privacy, safety, or whether it just be the health of business metrics. I'm understanding how much governance is in place today, what teams are in place today to govern it. So as an example, at Greg's, big investment in master data management years before my time. I've inherited the MDM and the data governance team. They recognise the importance of data, several years ago, and do that. So I know I'm coming into that role not having to fix that. There may well be tweaks and there may well be improvements, but fundamentally they're already taking master data seriously. Lots of organisations won't. So I kind of look at that regime that's in place as it gives me a good indication. In terms of prioritisation, I think that's a great question, because where do you start? And coming back to kind of the principles to what I work to is our job is to remove uncertainty from decision making. And lots of organisations will be using judgment, using experience, and a lot more will be using data to underpin. And that as a triumvirate gets you to how decisions are taken in the organisation. In terms of what to go after, it's where the most uncertainty is for the biggest bang for buck. And therefore, if data quality is one of the root causes of why uncertainty exists in that decision-making process, then that tends to be the place to start. But equally, I'm a firm believer in just good enough. So I won't. I'm a long way past now coming up with big, huge investment programs around data governance. You get something that's right for the use cases that you're going to attack, and assuming that you've got some red lines around customer and colleague privacy, you've got some red lines around safety. Those places, non-negotiable in terms of the quality of the data that you need to have. But everything else in the business has got a margin of error, and I think it's almost, I use the word loosely, criminal to invest millions trying to fix the data to the nth degree and aim for perfection, when actually 80-85%, 90% of good quality data will get you to drive a benefit in the organisation. So I kind of prioritise according to what's going to be just good enough, where the biggest pain area, and how do I remove more uncertainty from that decision-making process that gives us a financial prize.
Brilliant, amazing. And I guess we certainly see some of the different ways in which organisations will sometimes set themselves up for some of these components. And just quickly on that, on your broader sort of dealings, have you seen sort of data accountability and the differences between, quite often you land and it's quite clear. So it sounds, at the moment it's quite clear you've got an MDM team, people know who is accountable for some of that quality, but also when you've gone into organisations perhaps and it's not as clearly defined, and you've perhaps had to start with educating on who's accountable for good, clean data.
Yeah, and I think again, there's no right or wrong answer, and there's no only one single way of attacking this and approach this. I think getting a central competency in some shape or form, where the company is immature, where the scale of ambition you want to go after is significant. You want to try and get some standards in place. You want to have one voice of talking and describing how you're going to do things. You want some control around processes. And I think that centralization and that central point of creating a competency absolutely is a great place to start. And it's certainly worked for me. But equally, you are starting conversations to say, this central team is a custodian. It's not the owner. It's there to facilitate and take ownership of some of the processes to make sure that it's right. But actually, accountability sits across the business, and that going out to different functions within the business and starting to educate on what that looks like. And again, I've had mixed results as to getting people to step up and take ownership, and in which case brute force is the right way, because if they don't take ownership, then we'll take ownership for them, because it still needs to be right. It can't be an abdication of responsibility when it comes to data quality. But more often than not, people recognise that they don't want a central team making some of those calls, and therefore they will devolve and take accountability.
Brilliant. And some of the topics that you raised there, talking about data governance, data quality, and I guess when you've been in the industry, these are topics, right, that we've been talking about for some time. And then this wave of AI has come along, and it's actually shone even more of a spotlight on some of these foundational pieces, because it needs that kind of quality of data. So just to get some of your views on some of the effects that you've seen AI drive back into the data platform and some of the requirements of it.
Yeah, and I think, look, we're certainly at early stages. We're certainly at early stages of experimentation of what we're trying to do with insert buzzword here, but generative AI use cases, conversational AI, headless BI, whatever it might be. So we're certainly started our journey in terms of what difference it could make to Greg's. In terms of, and we're looking at productivity use cases. I'm a big advocate of whether you can get people from a traditional insight and business intelligence perspective, which again is one of the other teams that I took control over. Is can we get to a place where the business community can just ask a question of the data? And I think that's a beautiful Pandora's box, is if we can have an entire data lake where people can just ask questions of that data. Absolutely simplifies that journey in terms of getting insight faster towards decision making. It's a journey we've started. I don't think it's something that we've mastered yet. And I think, coming back to your question on data quality, I don't know how much of it is, whether it be hallucination within the large language model, or whether it be the quality of the data. We're still trying to determine which one's more important. We'd like to think that, given that we are already driving insights off the data, that's probably more right than it's wrong, and therefore it might just be the quality of the LLM that's given us the mixed response. But we've seen some good successes in there, and we've seen some real positive outcomes even at this nascent stage. But equally, you need it to be good enough to get out to market, and therefore you've seen quite a bit of the frailty in terms of the types of response you get. So I think data quality will be important, but again, I'll still work to the principle of what's good enough to make the decision in that particular use case, and that will be a horses for courses kind of question. Again, if you've got someone who's asking something of an LLM around colleague safety, the tolerance is really low. The tolerance is going to be really low for the accuracy of that data and the quality of those inputs. There'll be other decision making. It's just around general business metrics that, yes, may well impact and impede the decision that's out there, but you're really in the margins of whether it matters or not, and therefore you've probably got a higher degree of tolerance in terms of how you go about it. So I think it's really important to work backwards from the decision that's going to be taken and the insights you're trying to generate, and then tailor your latitude to how wrong it can be.
Yes. And we see people therefore varying the experimentation between probably starting with internal use cases first than front and center with consumer.
Yeah.
So, Rob, on to our final topic, which is working with consultancies. So obviously really keen to share your views and transparency, right, on working with various types of consultancies. I'm sure you have through your career. So from the GSIs to boutiques and anything in between, really, to just shed some light on the experience. And I guess a little bit as well, how you go through making some of those decisions, and any advice you might give to other CDOs.
Yes, and obviously, I'll try and stay out of dangerous territory on this one. So look, I started early part of my career, first third of my career, I spent 4 years at Capgemini. So I've certainly lived that the big system integrator life, but very very early on in my career. I think since then, I've probably worked with many of certainly the big players throughout my time. You kind of reflect back in terms of what does good look like, and what suits you. I think, look, they're all there to help and serve, and ultimately make money. And I think, my kind of headlines is a people game. So you don't want to work with a machine. You don't want to work where you're pushing up against, a process and systems and methods that are inflexible. And I think lots have gone on that journey and come out the other end in a positive way. But at the end of the day, the people that you work with are just the same people that you would recruit yourself, and you can get a mixed bag in who you end up working with. So I've soon realised that it's the most important thing is, are the people that you're going to work with going to be able to do the job, and can you actually work with them, and in terms of the quality. And I don't think there's necessarily a differentiation here between big, small, or indifferent. It's more a case of what you're trying to look for. I personally, and given the brands that I've worked for, we've not necessarily got deep pockets, and it's important to me that I work for big brands that aren't necessarily going to spend a lot of money, and therefore we're never going to be the biggest account with some of these larger providers. And that's fine, that doesn't mean you can't work with them. It just means that there might be a perception of not being as hungry enough, in terms of, there's got to be some kind of parity between the size of the brand that you're now claiming to be a customer, and how much effort and want you put into that relationship. So I've kind of looked for it, but it's always, for me, in the last several years, has been to look for the small boutique companies that have got equally, high quality people that work for them. They're hungry for your brand, and they're hungry for the relationship. But most importantly to me is that they have a degree of flexibility in ways of working, flexibility commercially, flexibility in understanding that, that we're like every other organisation where, contracts are based on things that you know and don't know, and in my experience, every organisation will always have a gap in how much they know or don't know, and it's how litigious you need to be in terms of saying, well, you said you wanted a red one, we're going to build a red one, but actually, as time's gone on, we realised that a blue one would have been better, and that how a partner reacts in that situation tells me a lot about that partner. Because if you're coming up, great. If you're butting up against, process, method, change request, we didn't agree to that, then that's not partnership for me. That's a very transactional relationship. So I like working with the smaller boutique providers and partners, and I'm really looking for that partnership. I'm looking for that kind of a hunger who's prepared to work with us flexibly. That's kind of the advice I'd give anybody else as well, who's be able to do that. Now, it's all horses for courses. There's going to be some organisations that have got deep pockets who can work with many different organisations of a certain scale, and I'm not here to judge or criticise them. It's just I've got to go with what works for us and my organisation, or the organisations that I've worked for.
That's brilliant, really insightful. And actually, I guess one of the parts there, I often talk to colleagues and our employees around, like, making sure that the focus is on value. So it's interesting what you say about the legalities of the contract, right? So actually we work in a very agile fashion and kind of consistently try to focus every 2 weeks, are we still delivering value? Have the deliverables changed? And do we need to reflect that in conversation, actually, and be able to pivot? So we've always tried to stay focused on that value piece.
I think it's really important. Like, at the end of the day, and I've been fortunate enough as well to build, to go from completely outsourced organisations to going to hybrid of outsourced and build an internal team. The last several years have been all about an internal team, and you're recruiting quality, and you're trying to recruit people in a team. That your partners should just be an extension of that, and hopefully give you a bit of an uplift as well, if you're lucky. What you don't want is to go to a partner because they've got the capacity but not the quality, because if you're just buying capacity, then you've probably got a plethora to choose from. If you're trying to buy the quality of who's been there and done it, then I think you can be a little bit more discerning. I think it's also important, I think, in the current climate as well, in the world of generative AI, is that who knows the most at the moment. If you're trying to get on with a a particular initiative, and you're trying to prove, real value from, and you only got so much capability and capacity in your own team in terms of what's going on. It's a moving landscape, as we all know. But then to go out to find a partner to help you in that, how much do they genuinely know? How much of it is, is vaporware? And where do you go? And I think that's a minefield at the moment.
Yeah, we and I guess we really enjoy working with your teams. One of the things we read at our values, and humility came out as a really strong value, as did innovation and trust and transparency. And the thing that kind of brings there is actually, I think one of the reasons why we really enjoyed working with your team is being transparent on the things we do know, the things we probably we feel like we could all jump in and drive forwards together. And a big part of the humility is that understanding that we get exposure as consultancies sometimes to some of these things at faster cycles, and it's actually part of our duty as your consulting partner to enable, empower on some of those things, so that then your teams can take those forwards.
I agree. The worst scenario for any leader is have people who pretend to know what they're doing. We've all got huge gaps in our knowledge and our understanding, our experience. Pretending you know something you don't is just the worst outcome for everybody. So no, we kind of appreciated people coming to the table and just start putting their hands up and say, well, this is as far as our knowledge goes. We can help you experiment to see what the next step looks like. But we don't know. We don't know what the answer is going to be. I much prefer to I much prefer to work with that level of uncertainty, head on, rather than find out after we've spent 6 weeks going nowhere.
Yes, brilliant. Well, look, it's been fantastic having you on. We got some quick fire questions to end with, so we'll just step through them one by one. But what's the best career advice you've ever received?
I mentioned this. I mentioned this the other week. It's my favourite bit. So an old boss of mine, who didn't know very much about my world, was tired, and the industry is full of this. The industry is full of this. Is if you're putting together a case that talks about it will result in better decision making, or it'll improve data quality, or you'll have data governance will solve all problems. She said to me once, she goes, Rob, stop telling me you're funny, tell me a joke. And what she meant by that is that anyone can come up with the platitudes in the data industry. It's easy to talk generally about what the upside is. If you want to convince people to put their hands in their pocket and invest in what you want them to do, you have to tell them specifically what difference it's going to make. Now, that's really hard in our world, because it's hard to put a financial value sometimes to the difference that makes. But I mean, this advice came 10, 15 years ago, and it stuck with me. Is that I'm very religious now on being able to try and talk specifically about, we do X, this is the result Y, and that's my joke. And I try to stop being funny. I try and encourage the teams not to talk in general platitudes about what the investment in data actually can give you. Be specific.
Really good bit, because data is a very abstract term, and it can be hard sometimes to get to that level of quantification.
Yeah.
So the next one is one book or podcast that you think every data leader should consume.
So I'm one of those people that feels like they read loads, part of the job, and obviously just snippets of stuff that comes up on whether it be LinkedIn or Medium. I'm a big Medium reader to the articles that get published on there. So I encourage people to subscribe to things like Medium if they can. But in answer to your question, can I have a few? And it's not about necessarily the data leader. I think one of the roles that I think we have is to be able to tell people who don't understand our world and educate them. In simple terms. And I find people like Hannah Fry and Cassie Korsakoff, who two super bright people who take very complicated subjects and make it sound easy. So I encourage executive teams to read Hello World by Hannah Fry. It's an old book now, and it's in AI terms, it's probably 100 years old, but she probably wrote that a few years ago. So I find that good. Scary Smart by Mo Gawdat, in terms of from the more societal changes and impacts, again from an AI perspective. And I use this again not to learn the bread and butter of how to be in a data team or an AI team. It's more a case of helping an organisation understand the entry points into understanding AI, And I find people who can take complex subjects and make them sound very simple. It's very good. I think Hannah Fry's Deep Mind series as well is very good.
Brilliant. Amazing. So finish this sentence. 5 years from now, retail data will be...
That's very good. Retail, 5 years data. I think my flippant answer would be keeping them in business. But that would be a general industry one rather than any specific organisation I might work for. But yeah, I think. Look, I think times are only going to get more difficult for all organisations, that whatever industry they're in, and I think that the retail sector is still going to have to punch very hard to try and keep customers' attention, customers' interest in their brand. And I think, again, alongside experience and judgment, I think data's got a critical role to play in that. I don't think I finished the sentence, really. I thought I'd give you a paragraph there, then finish the sentence.
No, it's excellent. And I guess one of the things there, I was wondering, as you were talking, I know he's meant to be quick fire, but I'm going off piece now. As you were talking there, I was wondering about the whole monetization. It pops back up every so often, but retail, obviously, where it knows consumer, it has that potential.
Yeah.
You see people nibble at it as a concept, but actually the monetization piece seems to have always sat in the background.
Yeah, two sides of the coin. So obviously internal monetization in terms of attributing tangible pounds and profit to what you do as an internal capability. And then then there's the halo effect of having a good competence around your own data and the insights. Then how can you then monetize that in an external capacity outside of your core? So if you're referring to the latter, I assume you're referring to the latter. Then I think certainly in the retail space, I think you've seen a few move into the media group and selling their media estate in terms of available state to market various brands, either related or unrelated. So I think there's one or five organisations that have done that to my mind. So I'd be interested to see if that plays out, and see if there's a real opportunity there.
And then, Rob, just finally, what's the misconception that you often have to challenge your peers most on?
That data's the panacea. So it might sound perverse coming from someone with the job that I have, is that I think coming back to the statement I made earlier, judgment, experience, data is what drives decision making and reducing the level of uncertainty. If you think data can suddenly remove all uncertainty, I think you're smoking something. So I like to remind people that absolutely that all organisations are going to be at different stages of maturity in terms of how they're using data and AI. I'm careful to say this won't solve world peace, unfortunately. But you've got to go and attack it to make sure that you're driving every pound out of percent margin that you can get.
Yeah, it's a brilliant statement. And actually, earlier on when you were talking about some of the data challenges and making sure you've got appropriate solutions, I always remember someone telling me they'd been asked for real-time store data, and one of the responses was, well, how quickly can you get a tin of beans on the shelf?
Again, I couldn't agree more. People who get excited about real-time data, there's absolute need for some real-time data, but work backwards from the decision. There's no point if you can give that in real time, but they can't do anything with it for another 24 hours. What's the point? And save yourself some money.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, it's great.
It's been a real
to talk to you.
Really, a real pleasure to have you on. Is there any final closing thoughts that you want to end with?
No, only thanks for the help. You guys have been great for us personally. So long may it continue.
Well, I know the team absolutely love it. It's brilliant to collaborate with your team.
Great stuff.
Thanks, Rob.
Cheers.